morning and aloha. Welcome to the House Committee on Water and Land. Our hearing today, March 15th, 8:30 a.m. Here we are in conference room 430 at the state capitol, which is now open again to the public. So welcome to our testifiers who are here today. Today, our hearing is for the purposes of considering numerous bills. But before we get started, let me just note a few ground rules. I urge our testifiers to try to keep to about 2 minutes per person if you can, and I'll try to remind you to wrap up after that time. Just to make sure we're adjourned in time for noon floor session, we may have to truncate the hearing. If so, your written testimony certainly will be considered by the committee. Please keep yourself muted if you're participating by remote testimony, and keep your video off while waiting to testify. And then after your testimony is complete, if you could again mute yourself and turn your video off. If you are having technical issues, please use the chat function to communicate with our technical staff, and they can help you out if possible. If you're testifying remotely and your connection is broken unexpectedly, just try to rejoin the meeting and I'll do my best to allow you to come back in and finish your testimony. If for some reason we have to reschedule the hearing because of any challenges, we'll certainly post notice so you'll know when we're having our hearing and decision making. And as usual, just please refrain from any kind of uncivil behavior and we'll be just fine today. Appreciate all the testifiers being here today, because testimony from the public and from advocates and from stakeholders helps the legislature do a better job. So we appreciate you being here today. Let's go ahead and get started, members. At the top of the agenda, Senate Bill 204 relating to aquatic resources. This is specifically allowing DLNR to use in lieu fee mitigation as another tool to assist their work in managing the aquatic environment. First up, we have Mr. Brian Nielsen with DLNR. Mr. Nielsen, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Brian Nielsen, Division of Aquatic Resources, representing DLNR on this measure. We stand on our written testimony in support and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. And members, Mr. Nielsen is assisted by Mr. Sakota as well. He may be available. And then we have written testimony and support from Jennifer Azuma, Administrator of Mahiku A'o Mai Food Security Services. Members, that's all the testimony we received on this measure. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure? Nope, hearing none. Members, any questions for our testifier, Brian Nielsen of Aquatic Resources? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next measure. Thank you very much. Senate Bill 570 relating to historic preservation, redefining historic property under the historic preservation law. First up, we have Mr. Alan Downer with DLNR State Historic Preservation Division. Dr. Downer, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alan Downer. I'm the Administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division, and the department stands on its written testimony and support, and I am available to ask questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Dr. Downer. Next, we have Office of Hawaiian Affairs in person. Happy day. Please come up, introduce yourself, and we welcome your testimony.
Oh, it's all right. Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kamakana Pereira. I'm the Lead Compliance Specialist with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, offering comments on SB 570. We think the bill is very well intended, but as indicated in our written testimony, we think there's a chance that Native Hawaiian cultural sites could be adversely impacted. Notably, under current historic preservation review, there is 5 significance criteria when you assess historic property. Criterion E is specific to Native Hawaiian cultural sites. Now, unfortunately, the Hawaii Registry of Historic Places only has 4 criteria. It doesn't include the 5th one. So there is a possibility that some Native Hawaiian cultural sites could be excluded if this measure is passed all the way through and became law. I avail myself for any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we have received written testimony with comments from Councilmember Carol Fukunaga. And we have testimony we've received from Sierra Club of Hawaii, Mr. Wayne Tanaka. In opposition, Mr. Tanaka, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the Waterland Committee. Sierra Club of Hawaii, we don't oppose the intent of this measure. We do have some concerns about the way it's drafted. Unfortunately, I do believe there's an easy fix. We have some suggested language in our written testimony. I believe the Office of Hawaiian Affairs also has put forward some language that would address these concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have, and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. And then finally, we have received written testimony with comments from the Historic Hawaii Foundation. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Is there anyone else here wishing to give testimony? Seeing none. Members, any questions for our testifiers today? Yes, Representative Kobayashi.
For Dlnr, any comments about the concerns of Office of Hawaiian Affairs?
Well, I guess my feeling is that the criteria for the Hawaii Register are flexible enough to cover any historic property that might be of interest to Native Hawaiians. I understand that that the rules governing under project review, excuse me. Obviously need more coffee this morning. The rules specify a fifth criteria that is not present in the Hawaii Register rules. However, I do believe that the register covers those items, perhaps not as expressly as the rules do. So I think that it's a simple matter to include those in the Hawaii Register. So I hear the issue, but I do believe that places of traditional cultural interest are covered by the Hawaii Register.
Another question for Dlnr. The current language includes the words district or area. What if the district is like Kohala or Wailuku or Lanai? I mean, or the area, could be whatever. Is that are those words too broad, perhaps? Because all of those areas would, of course, be over 50 years old or over 100 years old.
Sure. If I understand your question correctly, the point of defining something as a district is that within the boundaries of that district, there are historic properties that are not, well, there are properties that are not sort of individually distinguished, but collectively they make up something significant. The boundary would be drawn in a manner that encompasses all of those properties, but is no larger than needed to define them. So Lahaina is already a designated historic district. It's been designated by the Hawaii State Review Board. It has been designated by the National Park Service, the keeper of the National Register. It has been designated by the Secretary of Interior as a National Historic Landmark. So these things are sort of terms of art, I guess. The boundary is as large as or as small as necessary to include all of the contributing elements of the district.
But when an area like Lahaina or Honolulu Chinatown is designated, does that then put restrictions on what private landowners can do?
I don't believe it does. Those private landowners projects that they propose in, say, Chinatown or Lahaina are subject to review by the county. And at least under current law, I believe there's a bill later that may, in this hearing that may address this slightly differently. But under current law, those projects would be subject to review by the State Historic Preservation Division. under Chapter 6E42. We would comment to the permitting agency, and the permitting agency would make a decision on what to do. But that would be true also of a project outside of Chinatown, that designated boundary or Lahaina, if it has the potential to affect the historic property.
Thank you, Representative. Members, other questions? Seeing none, we will move on. Thanks very much to the representative for the questions and to the testifier for responses. Next, we'll move on to Senate Bill 573 relating to wildlife, requiring habitat conservation plans to include an agreement, an annual service contract with the facility to provide the required services. On this measure, we have testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. David Smith, the floor is yours. Please proceed. Maybe not. DLNR, is there anyone here from DLNR to present testimony?
Yeah, aloha, this is Afshin Siddiqui.
Afshin, yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair and committee. We stand by our testimony in support of this measure and available for questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Members, we've received numerous letters of support in writing from individuals and representatives: Tim Richards, County Councilman, Linda Elliott, Max Phillips, Kimberly Greason, Doug Perrine, Hannah Moon, Lee Miller, Meredith Miller, Hob Osterlund, Barry Ruff, Cindy Granholm, Ruth Yender, Nancy Rustad, Renee Breeden, Angela Huntemer, Rebecca Colvin, Molly Bach, and Michelle Reynolds. That's all the testimony we received on this measure. Members, any questions? Representative Kobayashi, please proceed.
For Dlnr, would this involve some cost or expenditure on your part to enter into an agreement, etc.?
Yeah, so the cost of the agreement with the service for rehabilitation services would be with the permit holder under the Habitat Conservation Plan and the rehabilitation facility.
But would this
So the answer
increase costs?
Is the answer to the representative no, that it would not add additional costs to DLNR?
To DLNR, it would not add an additional cost. It would be a cost that the permit holder would bear.
I see. And what would that cost be?
That's a hard question. I don't know what that cost would be. It would depend on that service contract that they have with the rehabilitation facility. So it depends on, the amount of impact that that project would have and what their needs are with that rehab facility.
Would that provide a monopoly service for some service providers?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Could you?
Well, I mean, the word seems to be that the plan shall include an agreement. And there are only a limited number of service providers for certain, shall we say, let's say, emergency medical and rehabilitation services to native wildlife.
Correct. So the rehabilitation services, they need to be permitted rehabbers to be able to work with these species. So there are a limited number of vendors, I guess you would say, available for that service.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Just to follow up on that from DLNR, Afshin, so there are service providers that meet these requirements on the different islands, like one on Kauai, some on Oahu, some on Hawaii Island, some on Maui.
So we have on the Big Island, the Hawaii Wildlife Center is a rehabilitation facility. There's one on Kauai, Save Our Shearwaters that also has the ability to do rehabilitation services. On Oahu, we do not. We have veterinarians are available to, respond initially, but the rehabilitation, if it's a longer term rehabilitation before they're able to be released, it has to go to one of the rehabilitation locations, and same on Maui.
Okay,
But there are some satellite facilities available.
Okay. And all of these have to be properly permitted in order to do this sort of work.
Correct. It has to be permitted by the state and also the federal Migratory Bird Treaty Office.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 1411, relating to historic preservation. On this measure, we have Alan Dlnr with Dlnr State Historic Preservation Division. Dr. Dlnr, please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Alan Dlnr. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. The department stands on its written testimony. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Welcome.
Hello again. My name is Funakoshi. I'm the lead compliance specialist with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We stand on our written testimony in strong support of this measure. A lot of good stuff in there. But we're available for any questions as well.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Leimana Damate, Hawaii State Aha Moku. Ms. Damate, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Leimana Damate. I am the Luna Alakai, or Executive Director for the Hawaii State Aha Moku. We support this measure, but we have a couple of concerns, and I just briefly will go through them. One is that the publication of oral histories may be problematic because the generational families and the different ahupua'a may be concerned that their knowledge and practices of taking care of their burials would be impacted if this knowledge was published. The second concern is that the measure calls for 2 members of the Historic Review Board. We ask that those 2 members be knowledgeable in the different oral histories of the different districts or moku and ahupua'a throughout the state. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I will be available for any questions if needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mate. Members, we also have received written testimony and support from Melody Aduha, Kapuna Caucus, Democratic Party Hawaii, written testimony with comments from Historic Hawaii Foundation, and written testimony and support from Rikako Ishiki and Daniel Lee. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? I have one question for Dlnr. Dr. Dlnr, the way I read this, it says that State Historic Preservation Division, it also needs to, is responsible for development, publication, and distribution to the public of informational materials regarding statutory protections for burials, historic sites, archaeological resources, including the process of project reviews established by this chapter. The way I read that, it appears that what the information is what are the statutory protections provided and what's the process of project reviews. It's not the details of the individual sites that are actually published. Is that an accurate read from your perspective, Dr. Dlnr?
Thank you for that question, Chair. I believe, certainly the way we read it, that this is a matter of communicating both the importance of historic properties at sort of a generic level, and also clarifying for everybody what the protections are, and the processes that will apply to implementing those protections.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dlnr. Yes, because I share the concern, and we don't want to be publishing the location of these important sites if that's not appropriate, and so that's not going to be something that you're required to do under this language, as far as I understand. So thank you very much, Dr. Dlnr. Any other questions for our testifiers? Nope, seeing none, we will move on then. Thank you very much. Next measure, Senate Bill 2056 relating to soil classifications. First up, we have testimony and support from the Department of Agriculture. Phyllis Geyser or representative. Please proceed.
Aloha and good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Phyllis Geyser, Chairperson, Hawaii Department of Agriculture. We stand on our written testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being available for questions. And thank you for your testimony. We have testimony and support from Scott Glenn of the Hawaii State Energy Office. I understand he's not able to make it today. No representative. Okay. Members, I urge you to look at written testimony. Next, we have testimony and support from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Mr. Rodney Funakoshi, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas and members. Rodney Funakoshi from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. OPSD stands on its written testimony in strong support of this measure. Thank you for hearing, Bill.
Thank you very much. Next, we've received written testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. Next, we have testimony from the Land Use Commission, Daniel Orendenker. Mr. Orendenker, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Daniel Orendenker, Executive Officer for the Hawaii State Land Use Commission. We stand on our written testimony with comments and with suggested amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony and support from the University of Hawaii, Dean Comerford. And next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Farm Bureau, Mr. Brian Miyamoto. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on our written testimony in support.
Thank you very much. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Anyone else here to provide testimony on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions of our testifiers on this measure, SB 2056? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 2764 relating to special management areas. First up, we have testimony and support from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Ms. Mary Alice Evans, please proceed. Or perhaps not.
No, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Please proceed.
My apologies. Good morning, all. The Office of Planning supports SB 2764, which adds some exclusions to the definition of development that have proved problematical in the implementation of the changes that were made to Chapter 205A several years ago. This arises from our experience as communicated to us by the counties, and we would like to support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Next, we have testimony in support from Dlnr, Office of Coastal and Conservation Lands. Michael Kane, please proceed. Do we have a representative of OCCL? No. Members, I refer you to written testimony. Okay, next we have written testimony and support from the Department of Transportation, also from the Department of Planning and Permitting, City and County of Honolulu, and also testimony and support from Hawaii County Planning Department. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Anyone else here wishing to provide testimony on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions for our testifier today? Nope, we'll move on. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Next, on to Senate Bill 2799 relating to the Kaiivi Coast. First up, we have Dlnr, Mr. Kirk Cottrell. Please proceed.
Hey, good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee. Kurt Cottrell, Administrator for the Division of State Parks. We stand on our written testimony, providing comments, but I would like to add a small caveat, and that is, while we're not shopping for more land for state parks to manage, we respect and understand the intent of the bill in terms of maybe reconsolidating lands on East Oahu. But I do want to express my appreciation for to the introducer, because they recognize that if they're going to give us more land, we need more capacity in which to manage it. And we do appreciate the fact that there's a blank appropriation line and positions included in this measure. So that's a good trade for us taking on more responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. And then we have testimony and support from the Hawaii State Aha Moku, Ms. Leimana Damate. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify. My name is Leimana Damate. I'm the Dlnr Director of the
Ms. Damate, we can hardly hear you. Could you move up closer to your microphone, perhaps?
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. We stand on our testimony, written testimony and support, and will be available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, mahalo. Thank you very much. Next, members, we have written testimony and support from Melody Aduha, Environmental Caucus, Democratic Party, Hawaii. Testimony and support from Wayne Tanaka, Sierra Club of Hawaii. Testimony and support from Surf Rider Foundation, Hawaii Region. Testimony with comments from Dylan Ramos, and testimony and support from William Reese Liggett. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Anyone else here wishing to give testimony? Seeing none. Members, any questions for our testifiers? Nope, seeing none. Yes, question, Representative Kobayashi.
For Dlnr, what would you need in terms of additional resources?
Well, the bill as written now gives us 4 positions: a property manager, a park caretaker, a general labor, and a technician, which is a good suite of positions. The property management position is really going to be helpful because it's a lot of unconsolidated TMKs that are associated with this measure. And then depending on what the outcome of public use, having the boots on the ground is going to be essential. In addition to the worker bees, the technician will be very helpful, and we could move the technician around to various other parts of East Oahu to do either outreach, ensure compliance, or support our operations, depending on how this all pans out over time. It's difficult to come up with a financial piece to put in that blank at this point in time. I'm glad it's there, but to be honest, I don't know what that amount should be at this point.
If you didn't have additional resources, would you still support the bill?
You ask really good questions. I would say no.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. We can depend on you for asking those incisive questions. Other questions, members? Seeing none, let's move on to the next measure then. Senate Bill 2944, relating to agricultural lands, prohibiting the use of important ag lands and lands with Class A or Class B productivity ratings for siting of a waste disposal facility. Okay, on this measure, we have testimony and support from the Department of Agriculture, Ms. Phyllis Geyser. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair and members of the committee. Department of Agriculture stands on its written testimony supporting the measure, and we're available to answer any questions. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, Mary Alice Evans. Please proceed.
Excuse me, Chair, I'll be testifying.
Oh, Rodney Funakoshi, please proceed. Yes.
Good morning, Chair and members. Rodney Funakoshi from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We stand on our testimony offering comments on this measure, recommending an amendment deleting Section 2 on the IAL portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from in opposition from the County of Kauai. Testimony in opposition from the City and County of Honolulu. Do we have a representative here? Mr. Roger Babcock? Please proceed. Do we have a representative from the City and County of Honolulu? Apparently not. Members, I refer you to written testimony in opposition. Next, we have testimony in support from Larry Jeffs Farms, testimony in support from Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, from the Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action, testimony in support from the Ulupono Initiative. Mr. Micah Munikata. Is Mr. Michael Munikata available? Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Micah Munikata on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We'll stand on our testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from Pono Chong, the Hawaii Crop Improvement Association. We have testimony and support from the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Brian Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You do have a written testimony in front of you. I just wanted to point out that this particular measure, we're only asking for our most productive agricultural lands. I believe the committee has heard the House bill and the City and County, which we know this may immediately or short-term impact because of the need to find a new landfill because of Waimanalo Gulch. But we're asking only for our most productive ag lands, A and B and IL lands. There's too many competing uses for productive agricultural lands, which we believe should be used for agricultural production. So we do ask that you move forward this bill, and thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support, written testimony in support from numerous individuals: Jimmy Gomes, Alan Gottlieb, Stephanie Whalen, Scott Dahlem, Gene Harrington, Randy Cabral, Jay Ashman, Frederick Mencher, Michael Fay, and Padmani Brown. Is there anyone else here wishing to provide testimony on this measure? Please come on up, introduce yourself. You can leave your mask on.
Okay, thank you.
You can leave your mask on.
Oh, I can leave my mask on, thanks, okay. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Roger Babcock. I'm Director of the Department of Environmental Services, City and County.
Oh, perfect, there you are.
Yeah, sorry.
Glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you, glad to be here. So I submitted written testimony in opposition. I wanted to just add a few things if I may.
Yes.
As you know, the county, according to Land Use Commission, we need to close our current landfill, Waimanalo Gulch, by March 2nd, 2028. In addition, we are required to name a new landfill site by December 31st, 2022, this year. We currently have a landfill advisory committee in operation working since last year to help rank potential sites for a new landfill, which we would then use to hopefully site a new landfill. Those sites have been announced and they're on our website, and the advisory committee is currently looking at those. Unfortunately, all of those sites are located would be eliminated by this bill. They are on important agricultural lands. There are many other restrictions. Act 73 in particular limits sites to no closer than 1/4 mile to any residential property. We are not allowed to site in conservation lands, and we can't site within certain distance of airports or in tsunami inundation zones, and of course conservation lands. So but according to our operating permits from EPA and Department of Health, we have to have, in order to run H-Power, which incinerates our rubbish and provides about 10% of the energy for the island. In order to operate that, it's required to have a landfill to dispose of the ash. By having H-Power, we reduce the volume of material that goes to a landfill by 90%. So we're doing pretty good there. In addition, we're currently in the process of contracting with our operator, Covanta, to construct an ash recycling facility where we're going to potentially make about 60% of the ash into bricks, which can be reused. In addition, the construction and demolition waste currently goes to a private landfill called PVT, which is located in Nanakuli. They are running out of space and will run out of space in about 5 years. Act 73 prohibits them from expanding because of their near residential properties. So that's going to go away. So in siting our new landfill, we have to consider all of the construction and demolition waste plus our ash. And so we need, so I wanted to kind of put it in perspective relative to the important agricultural lands. So the size of the landfill for 20 years of life to take all those wastes without any recycling of ash or recycling of construction demolition waste is 80 acres. 80 acres is smaller than a typical golf course, which is about 100 acres. To put that in perspective, if you had a half-mile buffer around the 80 acres on all sides of it, you end up with 466 acres of land that's needed for this landfill. So to put that in perspective, the important and agricultural lands on the State Land Use Commission website, there's a GIS map and it shows all the parcels, and then there's a table which lists 17 parcels. If you add those up, it comes up to 136,644 acres. And we believe that of course, that important agricultural land, that agriculture is very important. Food security, food sustainability, and moving forward, we need to do those things. However, we also need to have a landfill. So to put that in perspective, this is 0.36% of the important agricultural lands would be needed for the 500-acre landfill. So that's 1/3 of 1%. To put it another way, that's 99.6% of the IAL would still be preserved for agriculture if we were allowed. So I submit that while it's important to preserve agricultural lands, the only thing that this does is add the designation for waste facilities, and we feel that it's unnecessary in light of how much lands are actually available. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babcock. Why don't you have a seat and we'll finish our testimony, and if there's any questions, we'll call you back up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other testimony from anyone interested in providing testimony on this measure? On Zoom land? Hearing none? Members, questions of our testifiers? Please, Representative Bronco.
Mr. Babcock, please.
See, you show up and you get questions. There you go.
Good.
So I was quickly looking through the website to see for those 17 sites and I couldn't find it. So my question is, of the 17 sites that are proposed, is any of them on Windward Oahu?
So for the proposed potential new landfill sites, none of them are on Windward Oahu. They're all distributed through essentially central Oahu, from approximately sort of Kunia area out through like Pupukea. And there aren't 17, there's only 6.
Okay, 6.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Other questions? Members, Representative Kobayashi.
We have testimony saying that Kauai has a similar problem. Is the Kauai situation similar to yours in that if this bill passes, they will have 0 sites to consider?
Representative, I appreciate the question, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I know that it is a problem for them, and I'm not sure if it's quite as extreme as ours.
So if this bill were passed, what would you do?
Well, that's a good question. We will be, we have to figure out something. So we will be trying to see if there are any other possible things that we can do. Right now, we're not sure what we would do.
Is the current Honolulu site able to extend its life?
Well, I guess theoretically that might be possible. The landfill's been there since 1989. So by time it closes in 2028, it'll be there almost 40 years. So there's some serious equity and environmental justice issues that have been postponed and extended for many years. So we feel that it's very important that that a new landfill site be put into operation, and that is there's a lot of precedent from the Land Use Commission and stuff. So it is not supposed to be expanded anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, other questions for our testifiers? Yes, Vice Chair Bronco, please proceed.
Sir, what type of policies are you folks putting in place to make sure we reduce the amount of waste that goes into the landfill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, and all counties are required to have an integrated waste management plan. And we do have that. And we actually are one of the leaders in the nation in terms of how much waste we divert from our landfill because we have H-Power. Overall, it's over about 82% of all waste does not go to its landfill, does not go to a landfill. So we have very active recycling programs that we're very good at. And we also will be, assuming we do get the C and D waste, we'll also be implementing intensive recycling efforts there. So we, as you know, of course, we have a separate collection of glass and paper and aluminum and other recyclable materials, as well as green waste. Green waste is all diverted. We're also currently, the City Council is looking at ordinance related to food waste as well to get that, make sure that doesn't go to the landfill. So we work really hard to limit the amount of landfill space that we need. But because we do convert most of our waste into energy, we do create an ash, and that does need to have a disposal site. We are, as I mentioned, hoping to start recycling about 60% of that ash into bricks. It's going to take us a couple of years to get that constructed, but we've already been working on that, and we're in the contracting phase now to implement that. But unfortunately, in the long term, there really is no way to not have a landfill.
And also, from my understanding, the contracts that we do have with H-Power, if we don't provide them enough waste, we actually have to pay. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way the contracts work, so it's because it's a private company and they have to make a balance and make a little profits. They're guaranteed a certain quantity of waste, and so we'll pay for that quantity of waste whether or not it is delivered. And so that's just sort of a cost of having it operated. So I think that's one way to think about it. It's basically just a fixed cost. If we take so if we take less, we still pay the same amount.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here, Mr. Epcot. Okay, members, let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 3135 relating to historic preservation reviews. First up, we have Dr. Dlnr, Dlnr. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Dlnr. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. And the department stands on its written testimony and support. I'll be available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Department of Transportation. Do we have a representative from Department of Transportation here today? Please proceed. Perhaps not. Mr. David Rodriguez? No. Okay, members, I refer you to their testimony, written testimony. Next, we have testimony from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Welcome. Please proceed.
Hello again, Chair Carnes, members of the committee. My name is Kamakana Pereira, the lead compliance specialist with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We provided comments in our written testimony. We think the measure is well intended. Whether or not the counties can actually carry this out in the time allotted has yet to be determined. But the Office of Hawaiian Affairs concern is that we don't want to see stuff related to burials delegated to the counties. The SHPD has a dedicated burial sites program, and we have island burial councils that are prescribed in HRS 6043. The current language would also allow the delegation of this authority to the counties And we don't think that that's the best idea at this time. I think they're gonna have a difficult enough time trying to satisfy the current requirements. So that's our main concern. Additionally, we're also requesting that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs be consulted whenever there's a written agreement between SHT and the county, as we have a vested interest in many historic properties, particularly those that are important to Native Hawaiians. I'll be available for any questions if you should have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrera. Next, we have written testimony in opposition from City and County of Honolulu, Department of Planning and Permitting. Written testimony in opposition from Hawaii County Planning Department. Testimony in opposition from Michelle McLean. Testimony in support from Councilwoman Alice Lee from Maui. Testimony with comments from Councilmember Carol Fukunaga. Testimony in opposition from Ka'aina Hull, the Planning Department from Kauai, right? I think, yep. Testimony in support from Evan Oye from NIOP. Testimony with comments from Historic Hawaii Foundation, and testimony with comments from HGEA, Hawaii Government Employees Association. Do we have Mr. Evan Oye with us today to provide testimony?
Hello, Chair. Thank you for calling me. Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Evan Oye on behalf of NIOP Hawaii. We do stand on our testimony in support of this bill as it addresses a critical issue of development of more affordable housing and critical infrastructure for Hawaii residents. NIOP appreciates the legislature's commitment to collaborating on this issue, and we look forward to working together. Mahalo will be available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oye. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Is there anyone else wishing to give testimony on this measure in the Zoom room or in our conference room? Seeing none. Members, questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Next, we have Senate Bill 3251 relating to hunting guides. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Please proceed.
Hi, this is Jason Omick with Division of Forestry and Wildlife, DLNR, and we stand by our written and submitted testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Omick. Next, we have testimony in support from Hawaii Cattlemen's Council and testimony in support from the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We submitted testimony and we do support this measure with some comments. Chair, if the committee is going to move this measure forward, we do request that the bill be brought in to require written permission for all hunters, not just hunting when there's a guide. It is already the law, not written permission, and quite frankly, many of our hunters do have the relationship with the landowners already, the legitimate hunters. So if the measure is going to move forward to require written permission from guides with hunters, then we do request that all hunters are included in the measure. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miyamoto. Next, we have testimony in support in writing from the Maui Chamber of Commerce, testimony in writing opposing the bill from Jennifer Azuma Shropalek, and written testimony in support from Jay Ashman and Rosie Davis. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Is there anyone else here wishing to provide testimony on this measure? Seeing none. Members, questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 3134 relating to the payment of debt service on the Turtle Bay reimbursable general obligation bonds. First up, we have testimony from DLNR. Either David Smith or David Penn, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, members of the committee, and everyone participating in this hearing. I'm David Penn, the program specialist for Legacy Land Conservation in the Department of Land and Natural Resources. I'm the person that processes this annual payment from the Land Conservation Fund to the Turtle Bay Conservation Easement Special Fund. I'd like to thank the committee for hearing this bill that came from the governor's package, and the department stands on its written testimony in strong support of the measure that eliminates an unnecessary extra administrative process and frees up the Legacy Land Conservation Program to focus with more effort on its core responsibilities. And we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Appreciate your good work. And we have written testimony and support from Kaiivi Lucas. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Anyone else wishing to testify on this bill? Seeing none, members, any questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 3225, relating to dam and reservoir safety. First up, we have Department of Taxation, Mr. Isaac Choi. Welcome back. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members. Josh Michaels on behalf of the Director of Tax.
Yes, Josh, welcome. Sorry.
Sorry, I can't be there in person, but the department will stand on its written testimony opposing the measure in its current form. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next, we have testimony and support from Dlnr. Mr. Kardi Chang or Edwin Matsuda, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Dlnr stands in support but offers amendments to remove the loan program and retain the grant program in the measure. The grant program will offer the widest opportunity to dam owners who cannot afford the cost to bring their dams into compliance. The loan program, we don't believe will work. Dam owners will be unable to qualify, unable to service a debt, which could put them in further financial burden for the next 30 to 40 years. If they choose to do a loan, special purpose revenue bonds are already in place, and they likely could get a lower interest rate, and therefore there's no need for a redundant loan program. And a loan program is much more costly for the department to administer. If the committee does choose to move this measure forward with our amendments, we do have our ask for positions and the necessary seed funding that is needed to make the grant fund successful. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kardi Chang. Members, we have testimony, written testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. And we have testimony and support from Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Brian Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We do support this measure. We do have our written testimony. Just want to emphasize the importance that dams and reservoirs play for our agriculture industry. Absolutely, public safety is first and foremost. But one of the unintended consequences of the dam and reservoir safety rules is the possible decommissioning. As you heard Mr. Chang talk about the costs for compliance. So we do ask for your support for this measure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Miyamoto. And finally, we have written testimony and support from the Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii, Mr. David Arakawa. That's all the testimony we received on this bill. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members, questions? Representative Kobayashi.
For Dlnr or for tax department. Tax department talks about this bill not having any sort of cap amount. Do you have any suggestions about that?
I will defer to the DOTAX for that.
Good morning, Representative. Our main concern with the way the bill is written right now is because there is no individual cap, but there is an unspecified aggregate cap. Essentially, the first person who gets in, because there's no limit on their expenses, that one first person could blow up the entire cap, and then it would only one person would be able to claim the benefit. So that just a suggestion from us on how to make this more functional.
Well, I mean, what would you suggest?
Well, that's really, we would defer to Dlnr. They're the subject matter experts on what amounts and what qualifying items would be appropriate. But as far as actual structural language, in some of the other in the other tax credits that exist in law, you can see the sort of caps, definitions, limiting things that could be considered.
I mean, it's been the general policy of Finance Committee not to advance tax credit bills unless there's some limitations, you know, given the disaster of the $2 billion tax credit for high tech. So unless somebody figures out some sort of cap or some sort of limitation, I think that in Finance Committee, this bill has little chance.
Well, Representative, I can give you an indication of how much it would cost to typically rehabilitate a dam, and it all depends on the deficiencies, but typically a dam to rehabilitate it to compliance, to bring into compliance will cost in the millions of dollars. It could be anywhere from a couple $1 million to some dams are costing in the 20 millions of dollars. I don't know how that would translate to a cap on the tax credit, but at least from the grant or loan portion, if someone really wanted to bring their dam into compliance, they would need somewhere in the millions of dollars to bring their dam into full compliance. That's why we're asking for a $15 million seed funding initially to be able to support these dam owners. And as you read in our testimony, there's at least 93 private dams that are being regulated right now. And a good portion of those 93 probably can't afford to bring their dams into compliance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions for our testifiers? Big price tag. $15 million is what Dlnr suggested to provide to do their grant program, according to testimony. Thanks very much, Gardy Chang. Any questions? Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Senate Bill 3298 relating to shooting facilities. First up, we have testimony in support from Dlnr, Mr. Darren Ogura. Please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Bronco and members of the committee. I'm Darren Ogura, and I'm the acting administrator for the Hawaii Hunter Education Program, speaking on behalf of Dlnr. The department stands on its written testimony in strong support of Senate Bill 3298. And I'll be standing by for any questions you might have.
Great, thanks very much. Appreciate that, Mr. Ogura. Next, we have written testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. And we have testimony in support from Brian Lay, the Hawaii County Game Management Advisory Council. Mr. Lay, please proceed. Maybe not. Brian Lay, are you in the Zoom room?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me now?
Now we hear you. Yes, please proceed.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Brian Lay, co-chair County GMAC. Hey, I appreciate the chairman and everybody here in this bill. GMAC is strongly supports this bill. We need a legitimate shooting range for people to practice safely and humanely on taking game, and it would be greatly appreciated if we could get this moving forward. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lay. Next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Firearms Coalition. Todd Yukutake, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, Water and Land Committee. Hawaii Firearms Coalition supports SB 3298. There's no full featured range on the Big Island, and everyone's been asking for one over there. It's needed for training, firearm safety classes, tournaments, and concealed carry weapons are going to be coming up shortly. So probably going to be about estimated 7,000 people that need to be trained for that. Mile marker 16, the existing range is not suitable for training because there's no classrooms, private bays, things like that. So we do need this range. And there is funding for it. Pittman Robertson Fund has matching funds and also brings in tourists, state, across the state, mainland, and international enthusiasts. But yes, please support SB 3298. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yukutake. Next, we have written testimony in support from Gerard Silva, Marcus Tanaka, and Nani Pogline. And we have testimony in support from Michael Rice. Mr. Rice, if you're available, please proceed.
Yo, aloha.
Just again, I just like to emphasize my strong support for this bill. As the others have said, there's currently no legal range on the Big On. Anybody who would like to partake in sport shooting would have to either do so illegally on someone else's property or have a large enough property of their own to shoot upon, which can be problematic as they might not be able to put up the safety features that can be done at a range. There's, as mentioned by Todd, there's also the potential for tourism. This could attract, this would be used by hunters who come from the mainland to partake in game hunts here, such as mouflon sheep and even potentially pigs, to zero in their rifles, as well as gives opportunity for businesses to start up. As you mentioned, tourism. Hawaii, at least at Coco Head, there's always somebody there from Japan, China, or Korea, one of the countries that don't have a Second Amendment right to own arms. So, and there's a lot of interest over there in firearms. So they come over here, they'll go rent a gun and go to a range, shoot a few rounds, just to basically scratch that itch. So again, standing in strong support and on my testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rice. Appreciate you being here. Members, that's all the testimony we received on this measure. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 3298? Seeing none. Members, any questions?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Morikawa.
Thank you, Chair. For Dlnr.
Yes.
Okay, it seems like this is a deja vu moment for me for Kauai, because I think you remember we had this issue. I don't know if it's you, but we had this issue many, many years ago on Kauai. How many shooting ranges are there statewide for the public to use?
There's a Coco Head on Oahu, Umekahana on Maui, and mile marker 16 on the Big Island near Hilo.
None on Kauai.
Not yet.
Not yet. You guys are working on one or have been working on one for many years?
Yes, we've been, since I've been working on it or helping work on it since 2015.
Right. So this task or this group that you guys are trying to put together is only going to be specific for the Big Island?
On this bill, yes.
So can I assume that you guys are still going to be working on any other ranges that might be requested in other areas?
Yes, that's right now the one we're working on right now is for Kauai.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thanks very much. Senate Bill 3377 relating to commercial activities on beaches. We have first up testimony and support from Dlnr, Division of Boating and Ocean Recreation. Will Representative Dobor please proceed?
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and committee members. Ed Underwood, Administrator with the Division of Boating and Ocean Recreation. We stand in support of this measure, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support from John DeFries, Hawaii Tourism Authority. Testimony in opposition from Harry Robello with Aloha Beach Services. And testimony in support from Douglas Meller and Francine Tone. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this bill. Is there anyone else here wishing to give testimony on this measure? Seeing none. Members, questions for our testifier? Yes, Representative Kobayashi.
For Dlnr. I'm concerned about the word commercial and the word rent. To my understanding, some hotels have beach chairs which they set up, but there is no rent. That is, the beach equipment is part of the hotel room or the resort fee. Is that?
No, that's fine. What we're trying to prevent is first thing in the morning at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, there's 30 beach chairs and umbrellas staked out on the beach. And basically they're reserving it for people to come down, guests to come down, whether it's part of their hotel room or whether they pre-reserved it. And what we're saying is that's fine, but don't preset the chair. Just do it on a first come, first served basis. That way members of the public have an opportunity to use the beach. Because as it stands now, they're basically, the public is excluded from these areas.
No, but the bill would allow beach chairs if there is no rent. If the beach chair is part of the resort fee or the hotel room rate.
It would, but it would not allow them to preset. So they couldn't set it up before the customer showed up at the beach.
And I'm not sure your reading of my reading of the bill is that you cannot preset commercial beach equipment. And commercial beach equipment includes only recreational equipment for rent. So if the equipment is not for rent, it could be preset.
Well, we would consider it for rent if it's part of their room charge or however they pass on the cost. It still would be considered for rent according to our definition of commercial and our rules.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, members? If not, we'll move on to the last measure on our agenda. Thank you very much. And that is Senate Bill 3379 relating to biosecurity. We have testimony and support from the Department of Health. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. Grace Simmons, representing the Department of Health. We stand on our written testimony in support of this measure, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from Dlnr. Chelsea Arnott.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Chelsea Arnott, planner with Hawaiian Invasive Species Council at Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the department stands on its written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. And next we have testimony with comments from the Department of Agriculture, Ms. Phyllis Schumacher Geyser, Chairperson. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony. We support the intent and we offer comments. Thank you. Available to answer questions also.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Department of Transportation. Is there a representative from DOT available? If so, please proceed. Guess not. Next, we have written testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. Written testimony and support from the Hawaii Forest Industry Association. Testimony and support from Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We absolutely support this measure. However, Chair, I don't have it in our testimony, but we do request that the funding is returned to DOA, and DOA be the agency that receives the funding within this measure as the original version of this bill and the House Bill 2200 that the Waterland Committee had passed. DOA has a statutory authority to inspect cargo at airports and marine ports within the state. A lot of the functions for Port of Entry biosecurity program do fall under DOA as the lead. So we are requesting that the funding go back to Department of Agriculture. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. And finally, written testimony and support from Doug Perrine. That's all the testimony we received on this. Anyone else here to provide testimony on this bill? Seeing none, members, questions? Seeing none, Thank you very much to all the testifiers today. That's all the bills on our agenda. We'd like to now move into decision-making. So if members would go back to the top of the agenda. Okay, on Senate Bill 204. It's an important measure. I'm grateful that the Senate has moved it along and sent it back to us for consideration. I'd like to move this out merely by defecting the effective date and then passing it on to the next committee. So it'd be an HD1 defecting the effective date. Comments, questions, discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 204 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 204 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ganadin? Aye. Representative Kobayashi?
Aye.
Representative Kong?
Aye.
Representative Morikawa?
Aye.
Representative Ono?
Aye.
Representative McDermott?
Yes.
The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 570. This is an important measure, but I think it needs some work. So I'm going to recommend that we pass out an HD1 and incorporate the recommendation of the Sierra Club of Hawaii. I think that that is similar to what Office of Hawaiian Affairs has suggested, but it's, I think, slightly better language. So my recommendation is pass out an HD1 with the Sierra Club, with the amendment offered by Sierra Club in their testimony. We do need to make sure that we don't inadvertently remove protection to our ancient sites. Members, any discussion? Representative Kobayashi.
Does that include the 100 years?
Yes. So if you look at the testimony from Sierra Club, historic property, so it would be historic property means any building, structure, object, district, area, or site, including Heiau underwater site that is over 100 years old, or any building, structure, district, area, or site that is over 50 years old and that meets the criteria for being entered into the Hawaii Register of Historic Places. So it's two different parts of that definition.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, members?
No, I'm older.
Yeah, you would qualify, Representative. Yes. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, recommendation is to pass SB 570 with amendments. Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 570 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 573. It already has a defective effective date. I'd like to move this out as is. Comments, discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 573 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 573 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 1411. This is a very important topic that needs more discussion. I want to move this along. I am not an expert in this matter, but there's a compelling reason to try to make sure that we do everything we can to protect pre-contact historic property. What that means, how easy it is to identify what that is, I think needs still to have conversation with the experts in the field. So what my recommendation, since it already has a defective effective date, I think it's got strong content in it. I'd like to move it forward as is. Comments? Discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 1411 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass Senate Bill 1411 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, Senate Bill 2056 relating to soil classifications. Noting the Land Use Commission was wanting to mandate OPSD work with them and the Department of Ag. I think I'd like to move this forward as is. noting that OPSD has a history of reaching out to those who are expert in the content area that they're working in. And so I think it's sufficient the way it is written now. It has a defective effective date. So my recommendation is to move it out as is. Comments? Questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, SB 2056 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2056 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 2764 relating to special management areas. I think this is written just fine. It does need some technical amendments, so I want to recommend passing out an HD1 with tech amendments. It already has a defective effective date, and I'd like to move that out. HD1 tech amendments only. Members, discussion, questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 2764 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass Senate Bill 2764 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 2799 relating to the Kaiivi Coast. This is an ambitious bill. Important that we move this forward. Still a lot of work that needs to be done on this, but I think it is worthwhile pursuing. My recommendation, since it has a defective effective date already, is to move it out as is. Comments, questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, SB 2799 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2799 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 2944. This is an important topic, and it really puts the city and county of Honolulu and county of Kauai in a very difficult situation, and I appreciate that. Same time, we do need to protect agriculture. Appreciate Mr. Babcock being here today to give us his insight on it. I will note, members, that the House companion to this, House Bill 1712, is moving in the Senate, and for that reason, I would like to defer this measure. We don't need to be duplicating the effort in the two chambers. So my recommendation is to defer Senate Bill 2944 and look for House Bill 1712 that is moving in the Senate. Any questions or concerns, members? Thank you. Moving on. Senate Bill 3135 relating to historic preservation reviews. This is a very important discussion that is not ripe for legislation. If you notice, the counties uniformly were opposed to this. And I think the State Historic Preservation Division wants this to happen, but I think there needs to be much further discussion with the counties and figure out a path forward. We need to also make sure that burials are addressed properly, as was mentioned by Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So this still needs more work. So my recommendation on SB 3135 is to defer. Questions, comments, members?
Thank you, Chair. You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
Oh, certainly. Any other questions or comments? Appreciate that. Okay, so we will defer SB 3135. Going on, Senate Bill 3251 relating to hunting guides. My recommendation on this one is to adopt the amendments as recommended by Hawaii Farm Bureau in their testimony. And so we would pass out an HD1. It already has a defective effective date, so I would just include Hawaii Farm Bureau amendments. Discussion, comments, members?
The amendment is all hunters.
Yes, it actually has two parts to it. Yes. Yes, it is. It is to ensure that all hunters have written permission. Any other comments, questions? If not, Vice Chair for the vote. Senate Bill 3251 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3251 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 3134 relating to the payment of debt service on the Turtle Bay reimbursable general obligation bonds. This is a government efficiency bill. I propose, since it has a defective effective date, we move it out as is. Questions, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 3134 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3134 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 3225, relating to dam and reservoir safety. Very interesting. Dlnr says, don't give any loans, just give grants, and give us $15 million and a couple of positions. DOTEX doesn't like the tax credit. I have sticker shock. And this is 15 million you could spend on one reservoir. This is not ready to move forward. I propose we defer this measure. That's my recommendation, to defer Senate Bill 3225 and send it back for more work. Any discussion, comments, members?
Sure. In the
Please,
future,
Representative Ganadin.
yeah,
Use the microphone if you would.
all right. Thank you, Chair. In the future, I'm hoping that we could consider using federal funds. We have a significant amount of money coming from the federal government for infrastructure improvements for this kind of a thing. Although these dams are on private property, they do pose a significant danger to property and lives, as we saw in Kauai and throughout the country over the last several years, especially with climate change. So I think that in future versions of this, we can consider using federal funds, mixing with state funds and better coordination.
Good idea, good idea. If you're interested, we'll work together on that one.
Can't wait.
Thank you. Big reservoir in Kaiivi, I know you're concerned about. No, I'm joking. No. No, this is a very serious concern. I have a number of constituents that have very large reservoirs. They don't know what to do. They can't afford to actually bring it up to compliance. And so it's stuck. But this is not something I want to spend our limited public funds on at this time. So we're going to defer this measure. Any other comments, members? Seeing none, let's move on. Senate Bill 3298, relating to shooting facilities. While this is only focused in the county of Hawaii, I know it's a need elsewhere. I'm glad to hear that Kauai County is getting some attention, because everybody needs to have a safe place to practice shooting. That being said, I'd like to move this measure forward as is. It's got a defective effective date. I think this is something that we've been trying to get organized in Hawaii County, and that this will assist. So my recommendation is to move out Senate Bill 3298 as is. Questions, comments, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 3298 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3298 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Senate Bill 3377, relating to commercial activities on beaches. This is, we have to deal with this issue. Dlnr says that they've tried to enforce this, but they keep losing their cases. So we need to strengthen the legislation. I think this bill is a start, but it needs to be strengthened further. What I'd like to do is to adopt the amendments as recommended by Mr. Miller in his testimony, so that I think it would be more effective. And you can refer to the testimony there. It would apply to all beaches managed by Dlnr. It would apply both prior to and after completion of rental contracts. It would authorize exemptions under Dlnr rules, so that they could actually allow for commercial outrigger canoes, for example, to be stored on the beach. And also authorize Dlnr to administratively impose civil fines, not less than 50 and not more than 1,000 for each instance of violation. So those are my recommendations. Members, any questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 3377 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3377 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. And finally, last bill on the agenda, Senate Bill 3379. I appreciate the suggestion to change that this money would go to Department of Agriculture rather than Dlnr. I will leave that discussion to Finance Committee. That's an important balancing of our budget within the different categories. And if Finance is interested in moving this forward, we can work on this together. But my recommendation, since it has a defective effective date, is to move it out as is. Questions, comments, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. SB 3379 as is.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3379 as is. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. There being no further business before this committee today, we are now adjourned.